Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to put a kill switch in your car? Now, I've seen a lot of talk about this. There's been a few people on the channel who've hit me up. It's like, Muda, what about those kill switches in the car? You know the government can shut down your car anywhere? Now, I'm going to give you guys a real black pill in this video. The kind of stuff we're talking about has been in existence since before I started my YouTube channel back in 2012, okay? So this is some really, creepy, privacy violating stuff. If you buy a modern vehicle, probably after 2008, you are subject to an insane level of privacy busting that you probably never expected before. Now, I talk a lot about computers, I talk a lot about internet safety, I talk a lot about your privacy. But the reason why I don't talk a lot about it with cars is that we've kind of lost that battle. If you really want to be truly private out in the world when you're driving, you probably want to stick with a 1990s Camry or a 1990s Civic, okay? Something from that era, the 90s, will probably be the most, innocent, non-data reporting car you have by virtue of the fact that it doesn't even have the technology we're talking about today. So back in 2022, there was this sort of Biden provision that was pushed through, which mandated that new vehicles would introduce advanced drunk driving prevention technology. Now, I want to read this really carefully over here so we can kind of go over everything. So underneath these laws, to ensure the prevention of alcohol-impaired driving fatalities, advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology must be standard equipment in all new passenger motor vehicles. The term advanced drunk and impairment technology means a system that A, can passively monitor the performance of a driver of a motor vehicle to accurately identify whether the driver may be impaired, and 2, prevent or limit motor vehicle operation if an impairment is detected. So this is where the kill switch argument is being brought in. Nobody's saying the government's automatically putting in a kill switch that the government can go in and press one button on their keyboard and your car stops. They already fucking have that, okay? And we'll get to it why. But the reality of this is that, obviously drunk driving is a fucking issue. I am somebody that has lost loved ones to drunk drivers. I fucking hate drunk drivers, The fact that these pieces of shit can get on the road, drive their vehicle, impact with somebody else, and they are the ones that get to see God, and these pieces of shit get to fucking breathe their next breath and come back and do it all over again, is fucking batshit insane to me. I'm not even talking about, I drove my car a little buzzed, after a beer. No, I'm talking about people that are literally swerving, can't even fucking manage the gear shift properly. They have no idea what they're doing, and they're driving a vehicle. They're driving a multi-ton death machine at fucking death speeds on the road. I hate that stuff, and you would imagine that somebody like me would be like, yeah, I absolutely sign up for this. But as somebody that cares about your privacy and your ownership, I think even this might be going a bit too far, and I'll get to why in a second, because really, there's no actual mechanism. These laws get introduced, but the problem with these laws is that the boomers that write this shit don't actually come up with a plan before they write this to detail how they can do this privately. Anyways, B, let's finish this off, can passively and accurately detect whether the blood alcohol concentration of a driver of a motor vehicle is equal or greater to the concentration described, so basically the fucking legal limit, which I think is 0.07. Prevent or limit the motor vehicle if a blood alcohol concentration above it is detected, yada yada yada. So what kind of fucks with me on B is there's really one way that I know how to calculate people's blood alcohol, which is using these breathalyzer systems. Now this is a fucking ignition interlock, meaning that if you're somebody that has ever been caught driving drunk, you have to install one of these, I think, to your car. And so basically every time you start your thing, you have to go to your fucking, imagine this is the fucking thing, you go and then eventually, if you're not drunk, if you don't have a blood alcohol above the legal limit or anything at all, you can start the fucking car. If you are drunk, it won't start the car. And here's the fucking reality of it, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is a great punishment to people that get caught, right? I think, when people are caught drinking and driving, unfortunately, you have to actually commit the fucking crime to get this. Those people are punished with, I think you should have this stuck to your fucking car for life if you're willing to actually risk that DUI and do it. I know it sounds extreme to some people, But I think you should lose your fucking rights when you have absolutely exhibited yourself to be somebody that does not care about, protecting other people on the road or some shit like that. You can disagree with me all you want. I don't fucking care. I'm setting my ways for this, and I'm sure you're setting your ways there. But anyways, that's kind of the system, and I don't know how you can sort of achieve it without adding a breathalyzer to every fucking car, you know? So ultimately, this was supposed to be struck down, but ultimately it has been failed to have been struck down. Actually, it's approaching a key deadline. So ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, this law is directed by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration about the advanced impaired driving prevention technologies. So they were given this extension simply because I don't think even the NHTSA actually has any idea technologically how to achieve what this bill fucking wants, right? Because nobody gets the technology right here. Now, there's a couple ways that vehicles work like this, and I'll be completely real with you. As somebody that drives like a Tesla, which is arguably the most privacy fucking the most non-private vehicle, in the sense that that car is permanently connected to the internet, it's permanently connected to servers, and in fact it has so many cameras surrounding the vehicle, but also one cabin camera that captures every single thing you do. For instance, one of the things that happens in a Tesla is if you drive your vehicle with the full self-driving mode feature, which is where the car drives itself on the roads, makes a turn, switches the lanes, manages the speed, gets on or off the highway, that feature set requires you, the user, to stare ahead and focus on the drive, which basically makes the full self-driving feature one of the most useless features ever that you pay for, in my opinion at least, because, bitch, if I have to stare at the road, I might as well grab the fucking wheel and drive the car that I paid for, you know what I mean? Like, just because the car can drive, the whole point of the car driving itself is so that in the future, I should be able to grab my Steam Deck and play some Deus Ex while the car, if I can't do that, I might as well just drive myself. In fact, if anything, it's one of those features where, like, just in personal, you tend to get tired and fatigued because you're not actually engaging with the vehicle. But anyways, that requires you to focus ahead, and it basically, like, validates that you're paying attention by using the vehicle's onboard camera to see that you're facing forward. If you look down, for instance, it's going to scream at you. If you look off into the distance, through a window, it's going to scream at you. And that's probably how this monitoring will happen, right? Even if you're driving like a vehicle that doesn't have these features, most modern cars have some form of rest assistance where, like, if you're kind of swerving a little bit or you're not, paying full attention, some vehicles will tell you to get to a rest stop and just sleep. So I imagine, is this system going to work that way, right? Like, how is it going to be determining if you're drunk? Is it going to be taking a multitude of sensors, seeing if you're swerving, using a cabin camera to see if you're not, like, fucking looking around or possibly falling asleep? Is it going to take all of that feature set, run it locally, and then disable your vehicle if you've proven to be a danger to the road? Now, I'm going to be somebody that gives you a little controversial take. I'm not against this system if it's a fully local, non-internet connected system, meaning the government isn't deciding for you, meaning that, the vehicle's telemetry isn't being logged by a cloud server, and they're the ones deciding for you, like the manufacturer. It is something your vehicle's onboard processing is going to do on its own merit. I think that might be the most kindest solution out of it. But we all know that's not how it fucking works, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of these vehicles are perma-connected to the internet, and it's this level of invasiveness that's just going to get worse the more and more time passes. So people are starting to throw shit like AI will likely play a role here, and the reality of it is that unless the vehicles are going to increase their costs, because paying for the processing features to run that kind of AI and to analyze somebody's state, that's going to be expensive. Unless, of course, that AI is pinged from a server, at the manufacturer level, which at that point, your car will constantly be pinging your shit with or without your consent. Now, there are people that have found groundbreaking technologies to actually detect people's blood alcohol levels and detect impairment as they drive. Now, this is from like Seeing Machines. Now, obviously, look, the problem with this is any system that is reliant on a computer is going to be false positive. It's going to have false positives. So who fucking knows how many people end up getting caught into the dragnet for being drunk when they necessarily aren't actually being drunk? What is the way out of it? How are you going to validate if every single one of these things work? Somebody made a pretty good comment 3 months ago on like Reddit, where in order to prevent simple overrides, the system will need to ensure that parts of the monitoring and disabling system are functioning at all times. The default state has to be shut the car down, unless states are met. If you lose cellular signal, the car doesn't know whether there's been a network outage, equipment failure, or if you've disconnected a module. Therefore, the car must shut down if it can't access the network. Same if you lose the GPS signal, or if an accelerometer isn't responding. So again, a lot of these systems have to work in tandem. They have to work 100% uptime in order to make sure that these systems can detect impaired drivers, right? Which is one of the reasons why this shit has been so difficult to implement, because technologically speaking, there's no sound answer. Now, one of the cool things about this stuff is kind of talking about how hacks work. So for anybody that's wondering, oh man, I don't know if I want to buy a kill switch in my car. I'm never going to buy a modern car, Muda. I'm never going to buy an electric car. One of the copes that I hate so much is when some fucking idiot tells you, I'm never going to buy an electric car. I'm going to buy a gas car because the government can't shut down the gas car, Muda. And the reality of it is that, have you ever heard of a fucking company called OnStar? Yeah, OnStar has a few features like stolen vehicle slowdown. So basically, the way that that feature works is OnStar, when you call them and you tell them that I filed a police report, my vehicle is stolen, they will use onboard software to stop the vehicle, and in some cases, stop it during a car chase. So for instance, right over here, ladies and gentlemen, you can actually see it happen right now. So this vehicle is being chased, and the OnStar system has forced it to slow down. The cops are pulling up behind it. The person gets out. They're like, oh shit, can't really play Grand Theft Auto anymore. Whole bunch of chippies all roll around and basically throw that person to the ground. All fucking 8 of them, Jesus Christ. Oh my God, there was a little baby in the car, Jesus Christ. You know, honestly, it's stuff like that when you actually see it. It's like, maybe government overreach sometimes doesn't feel so bad. But then again, that's the reality where you have to contend with, am I okay with kill switches in my car? Or, you know, can I accept some danger, some bad in the world, if it means I get 100% of control over the things I have? When it comes to vehicles, like I said, pre-2012, okay, this shit has been kind of a normalized thing. It's been happening a lot. For instance, one of the things you may not have heard of were these two individuals, Chris Valasek and Charlie Miller, who basically hacked a Jeep Cherokee and got into its very, very, very intricate and should be separated drive control systems. So these guys in 2015 basically showed that Jeep had a whole bunch of security flaws that caused the company to recall about 1.4 million vehicles. So the way that this kind of worked, ladies and gentlemen, was through the vehicle's Wi-Fi system. They were able to, once they narrowed down the vehicle make, the model, the year it was made in, the month, they basically had a few passwords that they really had to try. And once they were able to breach into these systems, they found a module called the V850 controller, which allowed them to basically communicate with the vehicle's CAN bus, that allowed them to communicate with the steering wheel, the engine transmission, the braking system, and all a bunch of other things. So basically, without any form of like check or authorization or, hold on buddy, you shouldn't be allowed to do this, they were able to update the firmware of the V850 with something they modified that allowed them to take control of that CAN bus and then basically manipulate the Jeep as it was actually driving on the fucking road. It's insane that we're kind of talking about this, but that's just one vehicle and that's just one exploit. Who knows what other kinds of shit exist out there, right? So ultimately, anytime you buy a modern vehicle, you have to kind of understand that every single one of them, even if you buy the most internet-connected EV or a stick shift manual transmission, like, you know, just classic style car, they're all connected to the internet, they're all connected to a server, and that server knows exactly what the fuck is going on with that car every millisecond that it's on the road. So the thing is, in the government, the reason why this hasn't again passed is because literally the NHTSA is looking through a whole bunch of technologies. So, like we talked about with touch sensors, cameras, vehicle data, they're trying to find ways to confirm your breath alcohol concentration through all of these technologies, which again comes with its own false positive. The only way that you could ever truly achieve this is if every vehicle that came out in the US shipped with a breathalyzer built in, which you can imagine many people wouldn't be comfortable with. Many people would be like, why the fuck am I paying for every drunk driver's problem on the road? And the reality of it is, listen, man, if drunk drivers didn't exist, we wouldn't have to worry so much about the government finding new ways to implement shitty surveillance tech on everyone's fucking vehicles. But the problem with this situation is it's kind of a lost battle in the sense that most vehicles, unless you're buying something, like I said, from the fucking 90s, where you actually had vehicles that couldn't connect because they didn't have the technology to. Now, every single vehicle that you buy, even the cheapest shit that you get in the market to the most luxury brand supercar, comes with a level of telemetry monitoring that is unmatched by almost anything else. And the other reality of this kind of stuff, too, is that beyond the kill switches, the problem with this is when it comes to any of these technologies that the manufacturer can grab, you have to wonder, like, are they talking with the insurance companies too without a warrant? Are the insurance companies able to ding you on things that they're able to finally audit you on? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, we live in this world where all these private companies, forget the government, are just able to monitor every single fucking thing that you can do. And a lot of this is pushed for altruistic reasons. Like, obviously, we all hate drunk drivers watching this, but do you hate the concept of, bad drivers, drunk drivers, enough to the point that you're giving up another aspect of control over the things that you buy and the shit that you own in reality, right? So, obviously, look, this shit, in my opinion, should be squashed down. I think, if anything, we should probably have way harsher penalties for people that are caught drinking and driving. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, if you do drink and drive and you get caught doing it, I think your vehicle privileges should be fucking revoked for you for at least like 20 fucking years, like 10 to 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, you should not be allowed to pilot a motor vehicle if you have been impaired. And you might be like, well, what about people that make mistakes? Dog, even when I was fucking 21, okay, even when I could crack open a bottle of Miller's Lite and drive, I still didn't crack open the bottles of Miller Lite and drive. There's something called personal responsibility, and and you should exact some of it when you choose. It's your choice, okay? If you choose to make bad decisions, you pay the consequences for those bad decisions. However, in this case, society is the one that's paying for those bad fucking decisions. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, car kill switches, they are absolutely a thing, but it's not to the same level as, I would say some of the social media clickbait machine is kind of making it out to be. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not a new thing either. Kill switches have been a thing in vehicles. They've been a thing in vehicles for a long fucking time. But now it seems like the normalization of them is becoming more and more pushed. And really, the answer of how is the biggest question, right? Like, if this was totally local, if this was something that was not draconian in the sense that it gave so much telemetry back, I might even back it. But at this point, given the overreach of the government, and when it comes to things like the computer industry, when it comes to things like the internet, for instance, I don't have good faith that they have good intentions for stuff like this, right? And again, you can go full conspiracy theorist too, and you can even extrapolate this to what if they want to go after dissidents or something, or monitor people, or shut down a vehicle for somebody that the government may not like, right? What if it goes beyond drinking and driving? These are valid questions, and unfortunately, the government has done such a poor job that it's hard to not be asking these questions, right? Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and hopefully you like what you saw. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.